Imagine this, you're exiled from your own country and have nowhere to live. You're trapped inside an airport with no documentation, and if you step outside it, you'll be arrested and thrown in jail. Well, that was reality for one man named Mehran Karimi Nasseri. Between 1988 and 2006, he was trapped inside Charles de Gaulle International Airport in Paris, France. But how did he get into this situation, and how did he escape? I'm Charlie, and today we're going to look at why a man lived in an airport for 18 years. But before we go through security and bag check, why not subscribe and press the notification bell too? So to really understand Mehran's story, we need to go back to where and when he was born. That is in Iran in 1943. Mehran traveled to the United Kingdom in 1973. He did this to study at the University of Bradford. And as a student in the UK, he began to protest against the government of Iran. 4 years later, in 1977, his studies were complete and he returned to Iran. But when he got back to his home country, he was not welcomed. In fact, he was thrown in jail for his anti-government activities. All of that protesting had caught up to him and he was put in prison. But later on, he was exiled from his country completely. This meant he had to leave and he was officially stateless. He did not belong to any country and had no citizenship. He applied to many capitals of Europe. This included Berlin, Germany, Paris, France, and London, UK. But he was denied political asylum from Iran by all of these countries. This went on for 4 years until he went to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Finally, they were able to get Belgium to give him official refugee status in 1981. After spending some years in Belgium, he claimed his mother was British and wanted to travel to the UK and live there. Now that he had this status, he was able to get citizenship in any European country. So in 1986, he packed his bags for the UK. He traveled to London via Paris. But this is where things go seriously wrong for Mehran. On the train in Paris, someone stole his briefcase. The briefcase contained all of his refugee documents and his passport. So when he arrived at London's Heathrow Airport, passport control simply sent him back to France. So he had to get on a flight back to France's Charles de Gaulle Airport. When he got to the airport, he was arrested by French police as he had no documents. But his entry into the airport was actually legal, so the police had to release him. However, there was a catch. He could not leave the airport. Legally, he couldn't go into the country of France. But because he legally entered the airport from another country, he was allowed to be there. He was kind of trapped in limbo, legally allowed to be in the airport, but he could not legally leave. If he left the airport and went into France, then he'd instantly be arrested. Police were watching his every move and he'd be thrown in prison. So Mehran had no passport, no paperwork, and no country of origin to return to. This meant that Mehran had to live in Terminal 1 of France's Charles de Gaulle International Airport. He stayed there for a few days, which became a few weeks, which became a few months, which became a few years. 18 years to be exact. He lived out of his suitcase. And he spent most of his time studying and reading about economics. He also chronicled his terrible experience in his diary, which was over 1,000 pages long. To survive, he ate at the McDonald's in the food court of the airport. And if you're wondering how he made money, well, he made it from the airport. You see, people would often leave their luggage trolleys lying around at the airport. So the airport began paying flyers 50 cents if they put their trolleys back. So what Mehran would do is simply gather up a bunch of trolleys and put them back to collect the money. These weren't even his trolleys, they were just random people's, and he'd then collect the 50 cents. He also rolled his own Pall Mall cigarettes to pass the time. Eventually Mehran became a fixture in the terminal, and airport employees bought him newspapers and food every day. Mehran was also able to groom himself very well in the men's bathroom, and using the money from his trolley scheme, he was able to send his clothing to the dry cleaners. Eventually, Mehran's story was picked up by journalists in France. And this then later spread to the entire world and everyone wanted to interview this man. Journalists from all over the world traveled to the airport to interview him. And of course, he was paid for these interviews, which allowed him to make some money. This media buzz led to many sympathetic readers sending him letters. Anyone who read news stories about Mehran sent him letters of encouragement. One letter said, "We're hopeful that you'll find a safe, comfortable, and happy future." And some people who heard about his story in the media also sent him money orders. These money orders would be cashed for him by the airport's chief medical officer, Dr. Philippe Barjon. But eventually, all of this media buzz caught the attention of a French human rights lawyer. Christian Bourgeot found out the story and became Mehran's lawyer. He thought he could try and persuade Belgium to issue some new refugee documents. But there was a problem. Belgium said they could only issue the documents if Mehran presented himself in person. Of course, this was a problem because he needed the documents in order to present himself in person to get the documents. There was no way Mehran could get from the airport in Paris to Belgium without being arrested. After all, he had no passport or documentation of who he was. Not only that, Belgium has a law that states any refugee who leaves the country after being accepted cannot return. But finally in 1999, after Christian, the lawyer, worked with the Belgian government, he was able to get Mehran some new papers. The Belgian government sent the papers through the mail, and the French authorities gave Mehran a residence permit. But to his lawyer's astonishment, Mehran was not happy with this. He actually said he thought the papers they sent him were fake. He said that in 1981 he was given papers with the name Sir Alfred Mehran and a British nationality. But the name on the papers the Belgian government gave him was his original name, Mehran Karimi Nasseri, and the nationality listed him as Iranian, which of course he was. His lawyer, who'd spent nearly 10 years trying to help him, was absolutely stunned. And because Mehran was not happy, he remained at Terminal 1 of the airport. Now, you may think, wouldn't it be more logical for him to simply sign the papers and then legally change his name? Well, you see, the thing is, Mehran was not really thinking logically at this point. Surprisingly, living inside an airport for years can make you go a little loopy. And according to Mehran's lawyer, that's what happened to him. In 2003, Mehran's lawyer, Christian, told GQ that Mehran had gone insane. Apparently, at one point, Mehran had told his lawyer he was actually Swedish. His lawyer then said, "How did you get from Sweden to Iran?" And then Mehran said, "Submarine." Now, of course, this is all mumbo jumbo, but by this time, he'd gone mad. Then in 2006, Mehran was hospitalized for an unknown ailment. This ended his long stay at the Charles de Gaulle International Airport in Paris. And instead, he was taken to hospital and then later put up in a hotel near the airport. But he never did get on that flight to London. However, he was given freedom in France. And as of 2008, he was living in a homeless shelter in Paris. In 2004, a movie by Steven Spielberg was made about his life, starring Tom Hanks, called The Terminal. So, while he didn't get to London like he set out to do in 1988, he is now living in France. But other than that, no one's exactly sure what's going on in the life of Mehran Karimi Nasseri right now. But one thing's for sure, it's pretty amazing that he lived in an airport terminal for 18 years. But now it's time to make your opinion heard. Vote in the poll in the top right corner. Do you think he would go mad living in an airport terminal for 18 years? If you want some more amazing videos, then check out my second channel. There'll be a link to that on screen in a moment. But as always, thanks for watching. Check out some more videos on screen right now. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.